and stepbrothers and half sisters and stepsisters. Getting close to the bottom here. Let's see. Do I got any siblings? I answered that one. So let's go on. We're getting closer to the end. Pretty long video though. Can I cook? I wouldn't say I'm a great cook, but I'm getting really good at making these steaks. And I don't know, I enjoy cooking, but I wouldn't claim to be good at it. But I do okay. Can I swim? I can. I'm actually a pretty good swimmer. I just don't enjoy it. But I do love, I love the ocean. I love going on cruises. I really, really love the ocean. I just don't love being in it all that much. Although of any water, I will go into the ocean. The Gulf specifically, warm water. But I won't go into the Pacific. It's too cold. But I do love the ocean. For somebody that hates water, the ocean is something I love. Let's see, what else? Am I religious? I am. I'm not great. I don't know, I don't want to use the word crazy religious, but I don't know, I don't think I take it too far. I don't know, you see a lot of people that want to use religion to justify, the way they treat people or things like that. I don't do that. I believe in God. I believe God wants me to be a decent person. But at the same time, I believe that God wants me to treat everybody the same and care about everybody the same. And some people just, I don't know, they read things a little too literally into things. Use religion as a means that's kind of opposite of what it should be meant to be doing, but I don't know. Yes, I am religious. Shower or bath? Shower. I literally shower 99.9% of the time. Every once in a while, I'll take a bath, but yeah, I'll just say shower. Do I prefer the city or nature? Now, each has their charms, don't they? I mean, not that there's much charm in the city, but there's a reason to be there. There's a good reason to be at the city. But I would go with nature, hands down. I would love to have a homestead, be near the city to where if, I need to go to the city for things, I can, but be out in the county and have some land and, nice big garden, lots of worm bins. That would be my ideal life. Not because of the worm bins, but just having a nice big piece of land and get up every day and work on your land. It just sounds like a nice life. I want to move the light over to this side and see if we can get a little bit off the top here. Am I a good friend is the next question. The answer to that is honestly no. I don't think I am. I'm not a good friend. I'm not a good brother. Probably not a good son. You know, depending on what you're using to judge that off of. You know, I don't see my friends enough. I don't see my mom enough. I don't see my brothers and sisters enough. I would say, you know, I don't call them enough. I don't visit with them enough. I would say I'm probably a bad friend. But I do love my friends. I mean, there's only a few people that I've really stayed in contact with, like from school days and stuff. And, you know, the ones that have stuck with me this long, I certainly do love them, but, you know, I don't call them enough. I don't do enough as a friend. So I would say that I am not a good friend. Have I had any broken bones? I really haven't. A broken toe when I was 12, and, you know, I didn't have to go to the hospital or anything for it. Broken toes pretty much just, I mean, I guess it depends how bad it's broken, but mine wasn't. It was broken, but it wasn't too bad apparently, because it seems fine now, and I never went to the doctor or anything for it, so, but it was cleanly broken. It was obvious whenever it happened, so. But my folks said whenever I did it, they won't do nothing for it if you go to the hospital. So we'll just put some tape on it or something. And that's what we did. Excuse me for the coughing, but for some reason it seems like I'm losing my voice. How many TVs do I own? You know, 10 years ago, that would have been a lot. But my, things have changed in the last 10 years, hasn't it? Now we all use our phones for all our entertainment. I've just got one TV. When I got divorced, the wife took the TV, and I didn't even have a TV for a long time. But here about a month ago, I did get a TV, and yeah, so I got one TV. What is your worst pain ever? You know, I've had some injuries that hurt pretty bad, and, you know, kidney stones that hurt. You know, they say kidney stones is probably, they say that kidney stones is probably one of the worst pains ever. But for me, the worst pain I've ever had was a broken heart. And I know that sounds cliche and kind of corny, but, you know, I was young, and that one really, really hurt worse than any physical pain that I could, that I've had, you know, since. So that would be my answer to that one. Do I like to dance? I do not at all like to dance. I don't have good rhythm in that way. I don't know. I'm just not coordinated. I'm a pretty coordinated person, but when it comes to dancing, I am just not a dancer. I think we're getting pretty close to the worm mass. So I want to say that's where I'll stop. Get this last little bit of casting down here. And this was our haul, which that is a lot of fine castings that we got out of that. And straining castings is not necessary. It don't make them any healthier. It don't make them any better for the garden. It does make them look nicer though, but it just, you know, there's no benefit to your garden from straining them like that. I just like how fine they are whenever I do it that way. And you can tell the balled up stuff, you can tell that it's got a lot of organic matter still in it. It's still got a lot of work to be done to it. And not a lot. It's so close. If it was dried out just a little bit more, over half of that would have come out in the strainer if it was just a little drier. But it's fine. I mean, that's what the worms do. They break that stuff up, and that's what they live for. So I'm not in any need for the castings right now, so we'll let the new worm bin have it. So I made up some paper shreds. I use a micro shredder for my shreds. It makes the paper squares. It makes them pretty small. It's not the real long strips that some older shredders would do. These, I've seen one that even shredded into half that thick and half that long, so that piece would have been shredded into 4 more pieces. And that was the nicest looking shreds. So I got on Amazon and looked for one of those shredders. $400. So I think I like my shreds just fine now. Yeah, the worms like the smaller shreds better. I don't know if they like them just the same, but they get through them faster, so that's why I use them. My paper is a combination of phone book paper and this colorful paper. It has a little bit of a shine to it. It's got some kind of matte finish on the paper. Not quite gloss, but more than just the paper. Some kind of glossy finish. Here, I'll show you. Because we get these catalogs once a month or so in the mail. And it's got a little bit of a shine to the pages. And you hear people say all the time, don't use the paper if it's got a gloss finish. Well, the only reason that you would want to avoid the gloss on the paper is not because the worms won't eat it, because they do. They like it just fine. It just takes it a little bit longer. It's got to break down that. It's got to, anytime something's got that clear on it, that gives it a layer of protection against the bacteria and stuff. So it takes a little bit longer to break down than the other paper. Well, in the start of a bin, you know this paper is going to be in here for months, so it's a very perfect time to use paper that's got a little bit of a gloss on it. because it's got plenty of time to break it down. And you'd be surprised, in a couple weeks you won't be able to tell the difference. In a week you won't be able to tell which paper was the phone book paper, which, you know, that phone book paper is just very thin, even thinner than newspaper. And this other paper with the gloss on it, it's a little thicker paper, and then of course it's got the shiny on it. But in a week it'll start breaking down through that, and it'll just be paper. So on this bin, I want to move the light up out of the way. I wouldn't have thought that it would have been quite so hard to answer questions while working on this bin. It's taken me quite a while. But I want to fill this bin. I got a lot of those castings to use, so I'm going to fill this bin all the way up with this paper. This whole bag is going to go in there, and I want to let the worms work this all winter long. This big mess of paper. And I've never done this before. Had a bin so big of paper, but I got all winter long. So we're going to mix those castings in, because the paper will really likes to clump unless you get it mixed in with the castings and the granule matter. So we'll do that here in just a second. Let's go on. Oh, I'm almost done here with the questions, so now we won't take quite so long to finish this up. Do I prefer to fish or camp? The answer to that is I prefer to camp over fish. I enjoy fishing. I enjoy the piece of it and the action of it, but I'm not big on hooking a fish, pulling it out of the water, trying to take the hook out and throwing it back in, because I don't like to eat fish all that much. So I don't like hurting animals, so fishing always bothered me, because I'm stabbing a fish in the mouth and then just to throw him back in the water. But at the same time, I've had a lot of fun fishing, so yeah, I don't like it, but I've had good times doing it. But I love camping. Camping is one of my favorite activities. And then the last question is, are you weird? And the answer to that one is just, yeah, I would say so. So that's 39 questions out of the 40. The 40 is for you to pick somebody that you would like to see do the challenge. And I really can't think of anybody right now, so I'm going to think on that one. And if I think of somebody, I'll add that to the description. Alright, so I'm just adding a little bit of water here to the paper, because paper's so dry, and that was probably a little too much, but we'll just kind of stir. No, that wasn't too much. It probably wasn't even near enough. So let's move the paper out of the way. I want to start grabbing up some of these castings that are over on this side, and seeing how many worms we got here, because I forgot to look while we had them right there, visual. Oh, well, not visual. We had them right there, readily available. And it's just, as you expect, just mostly worms and those castings over there. I'll have to do another video another day and tell about my big worm accident that I had in, I would say, in the springtime, right at the end of the winter. And I'll bet I lost half of my worm population in this bin. So it's recovering quite nicely, though. You know, there's enough worms in this bin to do the job, and yeah, they'll keep reproducing over this winter, and by spring we'll have a good healthy population in this bin. But that's not bad. It's maybe, if I'm going off that bowl of 2 pounds that I seen the other day, then you know, this is probably around 1,000 worms or so. So let's add some of these older castings, not older castings, but castings that we didn't save. And this will help keep the paper from sticking together and clumping up by getting the castings mixed in with it. And even we'll get the worms and the wetter castings mixed in there too. The reason I wanted to get this done is I haven't fed the worms since before Thanksgiving. Since the week before Thanksgiving. So it's been almost 2 weeks, or has been 2 weeks, because I've been waiting to get this bin done. So they're going to be needing some food. I'm thinking that maybe I just set the record for the longest YouTube video in history with this one. Usually I make the bin well in advance and let everything kind of, all the organisms and everything, get all populated before I even put the worms in. But I'm just kind of trying this method out. I have made worm bins before, right on the spot like this, and they did just fine. But I try to do it in advance whenever I can. But this time I did it this way intentionally to try this kind of all at once procedure, see how it works out. See how that clumps up? That is the one thing I don't like about when you first start off a paper bin. You can get it to not do that, but you really have to wet the dirt and not the paper, and then mix the dirt in. The paper has to be wet at a pretty slow rate and then mixed in with the castings in order to prevent that clumping. And it's kind of hard to do. Probably the best way is to let all the paper wet with evaporation. You know, put some water in the material. Make sure you've got enough moisture in the material that whenever it evaporates, it will wet all the paper. Cover the paper with plastic, and then overnight, as that moisture goes to evaporate, it'll all absorb into the paper. And that's the best way to keep it from clumping, but it takes so long. And now I'm just trying to rush through this and get this done because this video's went on so long. But I don't know, if you've got a worm bin, try one time of just leaving your worms in the bin with the last little bit of castings, and then adding your bedding as if, you know, you're making a new bin. And if, you know, usually I have the bin already made up and ready to go, and then I just, instead of moving the worms to the new bin, I just dump the contents of the bin in with the worms. So if you do that, you know, you got your worms and their last little bit of castings in your worm bin, and then you've got your other worm bin that you had made up a week ago and that's getting ready to put the worms in. You just take that one, dump it right in with your worms, and then stir everything up like I'm doing here. Give it a try once and see if it just makes your casting harvest you know, a little easier. Not having to move the worms around, not have to worry about the worms' safety because they're in their home already. A little less worry with the cocoons, but the cocoons are pretty small. They end up making their way through the sifter, but I make sure and always keep moisture in my bags so that if the eggs do hatch, you know, if eggs do get in there and they hatch, I can bait them out. Once every few months I'll put a bait cup in there and leave it in there for a week and see if I have any takers. And sometimes I do. I've never had a lot of takers at once, but maybe 10 worms at the same time once, which I thought was kind of surprising. So it's getting decent now. As I move that, you know, wetter dirt around, it's getting absorbed by the paper, and it's starting to feel a lot better. It's not like a wring out sponge yet, but it's feeling pretty good. And it's not too clumpity. You know, it's still fluffy. So I like that. So a couple more things that I add to a new bin. I had quite a bit of this here, which is coffee. I was lucky enough that my daughter worked at Starbucks for a while, and she would bring me these huge bags of coffee because, as I mentioned, I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't have scores of coffee saved up, or any coffee saved up from my own drinking, really. But I do think that's going to change. I think I am going to end up being a coffee drinker. I just ain't quite there yet. But so the coffee is another good thing that helps keep the paper from sticking together. So I usually do a few handfuls of that, and the caffeine kind of help encourages the worms to eat. And in a new bed with all this paper, getting the worms active is helpful. And then my eggshell grit. I use a combination of eggshell and seashell ground into a powder, and I just use a coffee grinder to grind them both. And I grind it all with a coffee grinder. And on a new bin, I do add quite a bit of grit. it'll be there forever, you know. So, yeah. It ain't gonna hurt anything if you got a little too much, but I like to make sure they got enough grit for all this dang paper. Look, I dumped all that paper in it, and it's not even half full. Now that it got a little moisture to it. And then the next thing I add is my dry worm food, and that just puts some, you know, nitrogen rich stuff everywhere, and it also helps keep the paper from sticking together. I put a pretty good amount of that around, and that just gives them easy access food, stuff that don't need to break down. It's instantly available. So that's why I give them some of that powdered food. Now, the dry food mixture, my dry food mixture, it's not a super secret recipe. It's not, you know, some kind of subscribe to learn my fancy recipe or anything like that. It's a bag like this of chicken food, these little granules. But it's not this. It's actually the rabbit food. It's like this, but it's rabbit food. And it's green. It's mostly alfalfa and grasses. It's more green than that chicken food. That chicken food is more grainy, and the rabbit food is more greens. And so I really like the rabbit food way better. And you can throw it in full pellets, and the moisture will cause it to just break, you know, it'll cause it to just expand and break down into you know, just like if you've ever wet an aspirin and watched it just dissolve into nothing. That's the way these little granules do once they get wet, and they just swell and turn into a mush that the worms can eat instantly. But I run mine through this little coffee grinder. I just, you know, fill that full of the pebbles and then grind it up. Same thing with my eggshell and my seashells. And it turns it to a real fine powder. And then I don't hardly ever have to use this because, you know, their fresh food is readily available for them with my garden scraps. And I got a farmer friend that brings me his vegetable scraps all the time. Oh, now that feels really good with all that fine powder on there. You can see that it's just not sticking together at all. It has dried it out a little bit, but let's move the paper right off the top. See that? Just a little bit of paper, and then we get down to like a layer of like casting stuff. So we'll add the water to that level there. And then we'll stir this up again. It should be getting pretty close to being ready. Alright, so the castings really hold the moisture good. And the castings don't really want to let go of that moisture quickly into the paper. So that's why it just takes a lot of kind of stirring around and stirring around and stirring around. But with that level of castings, the volume of castings rather, that I've added back to this bin, there is a lot of area for the worms to go. If they're not happy with the paper, there's plenty of castings in there for them to find some shelter in until the paper would get to where they like it. But I've never had any issue at all with the worms not liking the paper right away. Like may be the wrong word. I've never had an issue with the worms not being safe and eating the paper and living in the paper right away. But once this stuff starts breaking down, once these bacteria start to grow and fill up the paper, these worms will be very, very happy. The combination of the castings in there and the coffee and the paper, once that bacteria level gets high enough, it becomes a material that the worms enjoy very much. And with me putting, all that bigger stuff went back in there, maybe another handful or two's left. So they've got a lot of bacteria right off the get-go. They should be happy, and that's a lot of paper for them to have to break down and get started on. So their winter bucket is now almost ready. I'm going to throw some food in for them. The last bin, I don't know if that's going to focus or not. September 15th is whenever I did a very similar thing, only I didn't add the paper direct like this. I added it to a bucket and started the bin a week early, and then I just dumped that in there. It was a lot easier that way. I will say that. Starting the paper a week early and then just dumping it in here was easier than doing it the way I just did it. But this is where we're at. So let me go get some food and we will finish this bucket off. Have the worms happy. I will be happy because the worms are happy. Setting the world record for an hour and 25 minutes. Oh my God, there's no way. I can't post that to YouTube. Holy moly. Nobody will watch an hour and 25 minutes of me digging in a worm bin. Alright, so the food I got is from my garden.